Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of GDDV 106, Development Concepts. My name is Kasanis. Well guys, we are now moving into week 4. If you were attending the school, this would be the week 4 lessons. And we're doing a pretty good job here. Let's take a look at what we've covered so far. We've talked about the idea of what this course is all about, and we've done the introduction to Unity as far as the interface is concerned. We also did an introduction to scripting where we talked about object-oriented programming, we talked about classes, we talked about functions, we talked about primitive data types. We moved on to logic and control, so branching statements like if statements and switch statements and the ternary operator, and we covered the idea of loops. Today we're going to take a little break and we're going to move into the idea of UI. So we're going to do an introduction to the UI assets available inside of Unity. Now I'm going to break this into 2 different videos because there's a lot here. We're going to talk today about the idea of the canvas, the image, and the text assets. All right, let's get started. So, introduction to UI. I'm thinking about it and I've got lecture notes here, but rather than leave my slides up like I've been doing in the past, especially for something of such a graphical nature, I think it's probably best if we head directly into Unity, and that way you can see all the different menus that I'm talking about. A lot of this stuff is menu driven, so let's head over to Unity right now and start exploring UI. All right, guys, here we are inside of our Dev Concepts project once again, and I've added myself a brand new scene that I'm calling Week 4. You can see there's nothing actually in the scene besides my main camera right now. Let's go over to our project, and we can still see that we've got everything else located within here, so all of our assets and everything are still here. It's just the same project. I've just started a brand new scene. We talked about scene organization towards the beginning of this video series, and I think it's important that you are maintaining a proper organization with your scenes. I've decided to break up my scenes into individual weeks, so that you can break it up any way you'd like. Anyway, today's talk is about UI, and let's go over and take a look at how we'd add UI to our game. If I go to Game Object, I can scroll down and I can find within the menu, I can find UI. And here are all the UI options. We're not going to talk about all of these. We're going to talk today about the canvas. We're going to talk about text, and we're going to talk about image. In the future, we'll talk about button, we'll talk about slider, scroll bar, and I think we'll talk about the scroll view as well. The rest of them you guys can take a look at. They're all kind of the same. So we'll take a look at some of them. Now, canvas is down here as an option, and canvas is a really important one. A canvas is basically a container. That's what your canvas is. A canvas allows you to add UI elements to your game. That's the entire point of the canvas. You add the UI elements to a canvas, and then that's how it is displayed. Now, if I wanted to, I could absolutely click canvas right now, and it would add a canvas to my scene. But I don't have to do that because Unity is smart. If you try and add yourself a UI element, it automatically adds for you a number of different assets. So let's take a look. I'm going to go up here to image because we're going to talk about that next anyway, and click on image. And when I do so, if we take a look over in the hierarchy, you can see that it automatically added for me a canvas, an image, and something called an event system. We'll talk about the image a little bit later on, and we'll talk about the event system a little bit later on when we talk about input as well. What I'm going to talk about right now is the canvas itself. And we can see on my screen, inside of my scene view, we can see what's appeared here within our visual range, within the camera's view of our scene. We get this great big white square here. This great big white square is actually our image. Our canvas, if you want to see your canvas, you can click on the canvas itself, and you can hit the F key while you're over top of your scene view. And when you do so, it'll automatically zoom out to show the entirety of the canvas. And you'll note that the canvas itself is huge. The canvas itself is huge, and the reason why this is done is because you're basically working one for one as far as pixels is concerned. That way you're getting to see exactly what your actual UI is going to look at. So that's why they've done it like that. A couple things to note right away: that the canvas itself will resize automatically in this particular mode, and we'll talk about that over here in the inspector. In this particular mode, the canvas is going to resize automatically. It's based on the game window. So right now it's set up to free aspect. If I change it to, let's say, 5x4, watch the canvas. The canvas itself automatically adjusted. If I change it to 16x10, well, the canvas automatically adjusted. So basically in this mode, it will adjust automatically. So if I stretch it, you can see that my canvas is also stretching. So let's talk about the canvas itself, because there's a couple things that are immediately evident that are different within the canvas or within any of the UI elements. At the very top, we still have a name for our canvas, and it's important to be able to name our canvases. We can have multiple canvases in our scene. You might have a canvas associated with a particular camera. You might have a canvas associated with the entirety of your scene, so you're always seeing this permanent UI on your screen, or you may have a canvas that is associated with world space, so you can interact with things in the world, and we've got a canvas associated with the things you can interact with within the world space. So you can have multiple canvases in your scene. So again, just like everything else, it's important to name your canvases properly, and that way you're going to be able to maintain an organization within your scene. When things get large, it can get very, very difficult, especially if you're working with a group of people. You might want to make sure that you have a good naming convention for all of your things so that everybody in your group can go ahead and find the things they're looking for. So we're able to name our canvas. We're able to, again, turn it on and off, right? We can turn on and off the accessibility of the canvas. I can activate or deactivate it. I've got myself an icon associated with it. I've got myself a tag so I can tag my canvas. Something that's different is immediately upon creating our canvas, our layer is set to the UI layer, and all assets you create will automatically by default be set to the UI layer. All the UI elements will automatically be set to the UI layer. Now, the other great big note is the rect transform. We don't actually have a transform node. We have a rect transform node instead. And the rect transform node works very similarly to that of the transform node in that it allows us to position our UI elements around our screen. There's a number of different things here. Now, right now, this one is entirely grayed out. And the reason why it's entirely grayed out is because of some of our selections within our canvas down here. So right now, it's entirely grayed out. We can't actually adjust it. And we saw that as I adjusted the screen size, the canvas itself changed as well. Okay, so for now, let's just ignore the rect transform for now. And we'll explore it a little more in depth when we take a look at the other UI elements that are normally affected by it. But for now, let's head down into the canvas itself, and we'll take a look at the elements or the variables that are available within the canvas. So let's take a look at the first element right here, the first component, canvas. And we've got a number of things that are important to talk about in here. Now, some of these options are going to change depending on what we've got for our render mode. So let's talk about our render mode. Our render mode has 3 options available: screen space overlay, screen space camera, and world space. So there's several different types of canvases that you can create. In screen space overlay, the UI is overlaid across the entirety of your scene, and it's always available. It's not associated with any individual camera, with any location. It is just always available. So it's kind of this permanent UI. You can turn it on and off, like I've already showed you. You can disable it or enable it, so you can actually change its visibility. And you can do so in a number of different ways, but it's always available. It's available across the cameras that you've chosen. In screen space camera, the UI is available only for the camera that you set it equal to. So let's actually switch it over here so we can see. Here we've got ourselves a render camera, and in screen space camera, what we'll do is we'll set a particular camera and say, whenever you're utilizing this camera, utilize this particular canvas, right? We haven't talked at all about cameras yet. And I'm not sure when we're going to, probably not in this particular semester. This is just an introduction. And cameras themselves are giant. They're giant. So you can do a lot of things with camera. And I have an entire course that's been going up right now on cinematography in games, and we cover this kind of thing in that. Anyway, so you can associate this particular canvas with a particular camera. The last option is world space. Now, in world space, we are connecting the canvas to a particular location in the world, or moving. It doesn't really matter. We're connecting to something within the world. So if you wanted to, you could use a UI element over top of your creatures to show their health. You know, there's a lot of different things that you could utilize a canvas in world space for. Again, now there's a bunch of things that have changed as soon as I went through these different options. So when I had screen space overlay, this was grayed out. When I had camera space overlay, this is grayed out. But as soon as I, boom, hit world space, well, now suddenly we can actually adjust our rect transform. But like I said, we'll talk about the rect transform in a little bit with the image itself. So depending on what you've chosen, the options within here are going to be different. I'm not going to go over every single one. Just know that each one, that's the reason for each one. So overlay, screen space overlay across everything, screen space camera for a particular camera, and lastly, world space for a particular location within the world. I mean, you can jump around the world too, but it's attached to the world in some way. Pixel perfect, make sure that your that your UI in screen space, you'll notice that Pixel Perfect was available both in screen space overlay and screen space camera. And in each of those cases, what it means is you are ensuring that your UI elements are aligned perfectly to existing pixels on the screen instead of having some kind of jagged mess that might occur. Anyway, guys, so Pixel Perfect, that's what it does. Turn it on or off. Let's go down to the canvas scaler because, again, this is also an important one. UI scale mode is available here, and we have a couple of different options. Constant pixel size means the elements do not change. Constant physical size, as far as the pixels are concerned, you've set up with a certain number of pixels, and that's what it's using. Constant physical size means that regardless of the size of your screen, that the physical size of your UI elements are the same. And scale with screen size means if you've given your players the ability to scale their screen, well, the UI elements are also going to scale with the screen. So that's another important one right there. A lot of people are always searching for that because they say, oh, look, I made my UI and I made it this size. And then my player, they have a 4K monitor and now it looks horrible. So you can utilize, depending on who you think is going to be playing your game, you're going to utilize one of those options. Okay, we'll talk about Canvas much more in depth as we move forward. It's obviously involved in everything you do, and maybe later on in some of the other videos, we might even take a look at things like a world space canvas to create different UI elements. Okay, so let's go on then and talk a little bit about the image, because that's the next thing I put up here. So image is right here. So the image itself is an amazing element. I really like the image and I use it for a lot of different things. Let's talk a little bit about the image and what we're seeing as far as the inspector is concerned. Again, we can see we've got our ability to name our image, which is extremely important, obviously. And again, we have the ability to activate it or deactivate it. We still have an icon. I'm not sure why you'd want an icon, but there it is. We've got ourselves the ability to tag our element, as well as notice that the layer itself is on UI, and everything else will be as well. Let's take note of, let's just zoom in here actually. Let's zoom in here a bit so we can see this better. Let's take note of the rect transform. The rect transform for this particular element is absolutely available to us, which is great. The rect transform allows us to move the image around the scene. That's what it's there for. So just like our transform node, you will take note that we have a position X, Y, and Z. So we can move this about in X, Y, and Z. If we go into our tools, we can actually physically move it utilizing the actual handles here to drag it around. You'll see that's updating here. So that's going to allow us to do it. We can also change these physically. So if I want to just have this to 0, I absolutely can. Now, you'll note that I've set this to a position in the X of 0, and I've jumped into the center of my screen. If I set this to a value of 0, so right now my X, Y, and Z are all zeroed. If you'll note that I have now jumped into the very middle of my screen. The reason why this image has jumped into the middle of my screen is because of its anchor points. So immediately below width and height, which obviously adjusts how wide this is. Let me just show you that really fast. If I say this has a width of 200, well, then it's a little wider. I can also adjust it utilizing this tool. All right, so I'm adjusting it. All right, so let's Control Z that so it's back to where it was. Okay, so we're back at 0, 0, 0, and we have a width of 200 and a height of 100. Immediately below the width, we can see what's called the anchor points, the minimum and the maximum anchor points. The minimum and maximum anchor points define, let's go in here, they're hard to see. Let's actually just move this off so you can see it better. I'm going to move this just over here. Let's actually put this at exactly 120 so you can see what's happening. So the anchor points are these triangles right here, these kind of arrows that are pointing into the center right now. And they're currently located, the minimum is, X is located at halfway across the screen and halfway up the screen from this bottom left-hand corner. And the maximum is halfway across the screen in the X and halfway up the screen in the Y. So our anchors are currently located right in the center, and this is the position that our image, because it's associated with a canvas, this is the position that our image considers to be its origin. That's considered the origin. So wherever the anchors are located for this particular image, that is the origin of this particular object. Now, we can adjust this if we wanted to. If I made this into 0.25, you'll watch what happens here if I change the min. 2.25, we've adjusted it over there. If I change the max to 0.25, beep, 0.25, well, we've adjusted the entire thing over there. And you can absolutely adjust this thing manually. Let's just put it back to half and half again. Half and half. You can absolutely adjust it manually if you want to, but Unity has provided for us a couple of preset options, and those preset options are available right here in this little square. This little square is actually a button. I don't like it as a button design, to be honest. It doesn't look like a button to me. It looks like some kind of map or diagram, but it's in actuality a button. If you click on that button, you're going to launch this kind of drop-down-ish menu. And this drop-down menu will allow us to shift a number of different things. It's going to allow us to shift both our pivot point, our position, and our anchor points. So without touching anything else, just by clicking somewhere in here, we've got ourselves a number of different preset options as far as the anchor is concerned. Let's say I wanted to anchor my object over here into the upper left-hand corner. I could choose this option and watch what happens to the anchor points. Bang! They automatically jump up right here to the very top of the screen. And now, if you take note of my rect transform, I have a different position and a different Y position, and that's because it's now associated with this anchor point. If I reset these to 0, watch what happens. 0 and 0, I am now jumping back to that particular anchor point. All right. If I wanted to go back to the center, I could come in here and I could click once again, and again I can zero these out, and I am back in the middle of my screen. Okay, so the anchor points determine the origin of whatever the object you're talking about is, and these are available for almost every single one of our elements. Not available for certain aspects of Canvas, as we already saw, but for particular modes it is. So there was a couple of other options there as well. Let's go back to our button here. And if I want to, I can see that if I also hold shift, it will also set the pivot. Now the pivot is the location that the object is pivoting around. Just because I've set my anchors to this upper location, the pivot of this object has not changed. All right, the pivot of this object is right here in the center of my object. Okay, so this is what it's pivoting around. If I actually rotate this object, it is rotating around its pivot point and not rotating around its anchor. All right, the anchor is what it is attached to as far as the screen is concerned. Whenever we resize our screen, the object will resize with that anchor, those anchor points as its origin. However, the pivot is what determines where our object is rotating. I think it's actually kind of silly now that I see this, that the pivot point doesn't remain visible when you're in rotation. That's kind of dumb, They should fix that. Anyway, right now we can see our pivot point, and let's say we wanted to change our pivot point as well, and we wanted to change the pivot. Now the pivot is not associated with the anchor point, all right? The pivot is associated with the actual object itself over here. If I decide that I want my pivot to be located in this upper left-hand corner as well, I can hold shift, and when I do so, the UI changes. You can see how the UI is changing. It's showing me that my anchor point is going to be in the upper left, and my pivot point is going to be upper left of the actual image. So if I click it, okay, all that really shifted there was my pivot point. If I go back into rotation now, and I rotate this object, you can now see that it's rotating around that new pivot point. Why doesn't my Control-Z always work? Okay, there we go. Let's put our pivot point back in the center. If I only want to do the pivot, I can't. I have to reset the pivot manually. The pivot is available right here. All right, if I want my pivot to be in the center of my object, then I actually have to go through and set it manually. So 0.5, we'll adjust it over there, and 0.5, we'll adjust it for my Y. And again, we can't see it because we're not in this mode, okay? So you can either manually adjust your pivot, or you can utilize the presets if you know exactly where you want it set to. If I wanted to reset my pivot point to the center, I wouldn't be able to just hold shift and click on the center, because that would also move my anchor point. So just be aware of that, all right, guys? You can't just do your pivot there. You can adjust your pivot manually right here, however. Now, the last option, it says here, anchor is anchor points, presets. If you hold shift, it will also set the pivot. And if you also hold the Alt button, it will also shift your position. So if I wanted this to snap up to this particular, let's snap it over here so you guys can see the entire change. If I wanted it to snap up to this corner here, I want it to this corner to be located right here on this edge. What I could do is I could come in here, I could hold shift, I can hold Alt, as you can see there, and then I can choose the right-hand corner and watch my elements. Bang, everything is now shifted up into that upper right-hand corner, okay? And when I start to move this object around, my image around, when I start to move this object around, let's move back a little bit here, I am moving it now in association with that pivot point. I'm moving it associated to that anchor point as well. Okay, so that's all pretty important stuff. There's other things in here that you can take a look at as well, other options. These are all stretch options. So let's say we wanted our we wanted our image to constantly fill the entirety of the screen, I could come in here and I could hold Shift Alt and I could do stretch all, and you can see now that my image is now stretching across the entirety of the screen. And regardless of how I change my game now, as I change this here, you can see that my image is shifting and adjusting along with the size of my canvas. Okay, let's put it back to how we had it because I don't want it to be across the entirety of the screen. Let's put it back up here. Even though I've reset it, take note that because I've reset it, it maintained whatever width and height that I had the current canvas size set at. If I adjust this, it's no longer going to adjust. All right, it's no longer going to adjust. I have to now manually reset this the way I wanted it. So I had it set to, I believe, 200 by 100. Okay, so I had to go back in there and manually change it. Okay, so that's the rect transform. We won't go over that again because the rect transform is available for pretty much every single UI asset. So let's go over here and take a look at the other things that are available. The image has a number of other things that are available to it. If we take a look at the image itself, it says source image. I didn't actually set any of these up. I'll be right back.
A short while later.
Okay guys, sorry about that. I've gone in now and I've added myself a number of different images that I can utilize as sprites for my particular image up there. Now I've added in 3 of them here, and each of these, if I click on it, each of these are currently listed as a sprite 2D. This is actually a PNG. So it has an alpha associated with it, and that's going to be important later on. We'll see exactly what happens on the canvas when we have an alpha. But right now it's set to Sprite 2D and UI, and that's really important. If you've started yourself a 2D project, then by default the texture type will come in as Sprite 2D, and it's absolutely imperative that you have it as Sprite 2D if you want to use it on the UI. Other options will not work on the UI. So we can see here we've also got, like, by default, if it's default, for example, it'll be available to be used as a texture later on, like in 3D, and you'll have to convert it to a sprite if you want to do so. Okay, there's a bunch of other things you can adjust within here. I won't go over these right now because we're taking a look at the UI right now. So let's go back to our image. Let's go back to our assets. Okay, so actually I should have stayed in there. Let's stay in our sprites. So let's go back to our image over here and take a look at where we were. We were on this source image, on the image component itself. The image component is what really makes this into an image, right? And that's what really makes it into an image. If we take a look at the image component, we have the option for a source image, and currently it is set to none. All right, there's nothing here. This white is just the color we're seeing here. If I adjust this color, watch what happens. Beep. Come on, adjust. So I can adjust the color of the none. All right, but if I want to associate this image with a particular source image, I absolutely can do so. I can right click this little target right here, and I've got all of my available options are here. Anything that's available to be utilized is available here. And I could choose one of these. I could choose, let's say I choose the Kasana's head. All right, and there it goes. It's automatically been populated onto my image, and I've got myself my alpha. I am seeing through the image where it's appropriate, which is great. A couple of things have actually changed here. We've got ourselves a material setting, a raycast setting, and that kind of stuff, which I don't believe is there if it's on none, right? Raycast is, oh, both of those are still there. What did we add? We added in our, we added in our image type. Okay, cool. So right there we can see that, a couple of things we can see right away. So we've added in some new options as far as the image is concerned, and we can see right away that our image does not maintain its pixel aspect ratio. Okay, it automatically converted into whatever this was. If I click it, the preserve aspect ratio then will leave the image of the size. So we've got all this kind of blank space over here. All right, so be careful about that. You can either do that, or if you want to ensure without actually clicking maintain preserve aspect ratio, you can actually just set this. If you know you got a square image, you can set it appropriately. It's up to you how you're going to want to do it. This way here, you don't have any additional space around the image. And that image could actually be used if you wanted to set it up to actually catch events and that kind of stuff as well. So if you've got additional space, just be aware of that. Same thing when we talk about buttons, same thing is going to be true of the buttons themselves. Anyway, let's go down here and take a look. So again, with the image associated with this, I can go in and again, I can adjust the color. And this is great. Later on, we can adjust the color and we can actually build ourselves, and I'll show it to you in 1 second actually. We could build ourselves a health bar utilizing this tint, and just utilizing this one image and this tint. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go through and you use you could go through and through code, you could animate the color tint to demonstrate damage to your character, health to your character. I wouldn't really recommend doing this though. The problem with utilizing a gradient like this is it's really difficult at a simple glance to tell if I am, am I almost dead here? Am I half dead? I can't really tell based on the gradient exactly what stage of death that I'm in. So it's really important that whenever you guys build yourselves any kind of UI health image or something like that, that at a glance, your player is going to be able to understand exactly what they're seeing. So I really recommend making it more clear-cut than simply animating the gradient of an object to be able to say how healthy your character is. But we'll talk about that in just 1 second. I'll show you an example of what I mean in 1 second. So below that, we have material, we have raycast target, and we have image type simple. Now, this is really interesting. I really like this, image type simple. Let's go down here and take a look at what our options are. Simple just means flop the image up there and allow it to do whatever it's going to do. And you can see the options we've got here. Sliced, again, it changes what we have options. This image doesn't have a border, so it's not actually changing a whole lot here. Let's go into and take a look at tiled. What does tiled do? Now, if I've got tiled set and I stretch this out, you can see that now I'm tiling my image. That's all that I'm doing, okay? And in stretching this, obviously I've adjusted the size of this, so let's just put it back to 100 by 100. So that's what the tile option does. Now, the last one we have available to us is filled. And this one here is, I really like this filled option. A lot of people don't realize that this is an option as far as images are concerned. And this is really powerful. In fact, this is how I do all of my health bars. Let me show you what this is. With the fill type, we have a fill method. So right now it's kept to radial 360. The origin is from the bottom, and we have this fill amount set to 1. It'll have a value between 0 and a value of 1. And currently it's set to clockwise as well, and that's because of the radial 360. Now, if we take a look at 1, I can see the entirety of the image. If I set this down to 0, I can't see any of the image. And you can see that as I animate this, we've got ourselves the ability to show only part of that particular image, right? You can make yourself a loading screen with this if you wanted to, or something else, right? I like to use this particular style right here to create myself a health bar. In fact, what I normally do is I will set this instead of radial. There's a bunch of different options here: radial 180, radial 90, horizontal, and vertical. So the horizontal split will allow us to scroll this horizontally, and the vertical split will allow us to scroll this vertically. So oftentimes, and again, you can either set it from the bottom or from the top. So if you want it to go from the top down or the top up, you can. All right, so those are all options that are available here. And as I mentioned, I'll just show this really, really quickly. What I really like to do as far as my health bars are concerned, I like to take an image like this and I leave it as a fill type. I'm going to click on my image, and let's just call this here our health, our image healthy. Just a quick demonstration here. Image healthy. I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate this particular object. So it's been copied in exactly the same location and everything's exactly the same here. I'm just going to change this to, instead of image healthy, let's change this to image hurt. All right, awesome. And image hurt right now, if we take a look in the order that it's appearing here, the order that's appearing here means that one of these is on top of the other. So if I go on image hurt, let's take a look and how we can find out exactly which one's on top. Well, I know which one's on top, but let's take a look. If I go into this and I change the color, come on, grab that. I don't know why you're not grabbing it. Grab it and move it. We can see that the image itself that's underneath is rendered after. So the canvas works like this. Render this, then render this. Okay, so I'm rendering image hurt. The things that are up here after in the hierarchy are actually being rendered on top. So that's really, really, what's this? Why is this launching? I don't have time to play games. I don't know why that launched. Anyway, the image hurt in the order here is rendered afterwards. So image healthy is rendered first and image hurt is rendered second. If I want to change the order, I can do so as easily as grabbing this and dragging it and dropping it above. So you can see now that I've changed the render order in the actual hierarchy. This will not work for objects that are within Unity. We'll talk about that later on when we start talking about things that we're adding to the actual, like game objects we're actually adding to our screen. So right now I've got myself image hurt and it's below image healthy, so it's being rendered underneath there constantly. All right, I'm gonna go back to image healthy. And actually, I'm gonna go back to image hurt. I'm just gonna set image hurt, instead of being filled, I'm gonna set it to a simple image. So all it is right now is a simple image. If I go back now to image healthy, as my character takes damage, I can start to remove parts. Oh no, I've taken half my damage, bang. I've taken another bit of my damage, boom. And then I can slowly get rid of the thing to show my character injured or not injured, all right? That's just a really quick note on what I like to use images for. And I use images for this all the time. Set up yourself a fancy little health indicator, and you can see exactly where your player is hurt. And the reason I like this better than the gradient is because it's very obvious. If I look over here, I can tell that, yeah, I'm pretty much at 50% hurt. But if I've got a slightly different red gradient, it's more difficult to tell. All right, guys, awesome. The next thing I want to take a look at is text. Okay, guys, so let's add a text asset to our scene. I'm going to go to Game Objects, I'm going to go to UI, and I'm going to go to Text. When I click text, I automatically add the text into the screen. And you can see now that it's been added sequentially. It is now going to be rendered on top of everything else that is currently here. Let's take a look at the text. It's really hard to see, so let's zoom in. All right, there we go with text. Right now, just like everything else, you can name it, you can tag it, you can set an icon, it's set to a current layer. We've got ourselves our rect transform, and the rect transform works identically, so I'm not going to bother going over our rect transform again. Okay, so we know exactly how this currently works. We can see that it's set up to the center of the screen, and that's perfectly fine for what we're trying to do. Let's go down to see the important stuff. Actually, let's scroll this down so we can see better. Let's go down here so we can see the important stuff. Right now, we've got ourselves this text component. And the text component is what makes this text work. That's basically what makes this whole thing work, all right, this text component. At the top of our text component, we've got ourselves the ability to change the text. Let's go down here so you can see this right away. It says new text in here, which might be really difficult to see on your screen. So I'm going to go down to color, and I'm going to change my color right away to a white so we can see it. I don't know why this is not dragging properly. There we go. Change it to a white right away so we can see it. So we can see that right now our text says new text. And if I want to make it say hello world, I absolutely could. All right, so there is hello world. The text option allows you to put text into this position. And this is accessible through code. So you can update this dynamically to show different things. Let's say you had a count of the number of coins that your character found, or whatever it is, you could absolutely do so through this text. All right. Below the text option is the information about our character itself, what the characters that are going in here ourselves. Right now we've got ourselves a font, and we only have the one font available to us. If I click on this little thing here, we can see we only have one font available to us. That doesn't mean you can't add additional fonts. You can absolutely go through, find yourself some legal fonts that you can utilize, and you can throw it into your project, and those fonts will all be available to be used in your text, which is pretty cool because in that way you can set up the game the way you want to. Everything does not have to be Arial. Okay? Nothing wrong with Arial. I'm not suggesting there is, but you actually have the option to put in custom text. And there's a lot of, custom fonts. And there are a lot of really, really, really awesome fonts out there. So take a look. I like to use defonts.com. I think it's defonts.com. I like to use Defont. Look it up. So many good fonts out there, guys. So many awesome font artists. Check them out. Anyway, there's a bunch of different options here, so if you want to set up normal, bold, etc., they're all available here. The font size, now this is kind of an interesting one. You'll note right away that the font that they've given me, 14, fits inside of whatever this default option as far as the text is concerned, the text size is concerned. If I make my font too large, let's say I make it 100, well, suddenly it doesn't appear anymore, right? And that's because it's too large to fit in here. So it doesn't get resized. Whatever size you've set your font to is what size it's going to remain, and it doesn't resize based on the fact that they can't be seen within your text itself. So be careful about that. Line spacing, you can change that. Whether or not it's rich text, you can change that. Down here is where you change your paragraph as far as alignment and everything else is concerned. So again, you can align it different ways. Right now it's set to the upper left-hand corner on the left-hand side. If I want to center it, bang, I can. On the top, if I want to make it in the middle, I can. Or if you want to make it on the bottom, you can. So you can change all of these things. All right, all these things are available to allow you to make the text appear the way you want it to appear. You can allow it to truncate, so if it's going to get cut off right away, or you can allow it to overflow. Okay, in the vertical you can allow it to wrap as far as the horizontal is concerned. So you can actually set it up to do all these different things. This is your font. This is your color of your font right here. So I can change the color of my font. We already saw that. All that is available for you right here. what I'd like to examine is I'd like to examine our ability to change our font dynamically. Not our font, to change our text dynamically. All right. So I didn't write it yet. I'm a little bit unorganized right now, unfortunately. Got to get organized for our next video. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to write a quick script, and I'm going to show you exactly what we need to do. Okay? I'll be right back. Actually, guys, you know what? There's no reason why I'm not just doing this live. So I'm just going to show you how to do this live instead of going off and writing it, because it's going to take me too much time. I don't have a lot of time to record today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this live right now. Let's name this differently. Let's call this our text example to start off with, just so we can find it really easily. It's right here. So this is our text example, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a brand new script to something within the scene. I'm going to add it directly to the canvas. So for now, let me just add a component, and let's add a brand new script. So I'm going to go down to new script, and let's give this a name. Let's call this our UI controller script. All right, super awesome name, UI controller script. Let's add it directly to the actual canvas. So I'm going to say create and add. Now, let's double click to open that up. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to drag it into my scripts folder first to make sure that I'm remaining organized. Why is my mouse not working today? There we go. Into my scripts. And let's open up our UI controller. So slow. Where are you? There we go. Oh my God, that took forever. Okay. All right, guys, let's take a look at this. So right now we've got ourselves, I don't know what this is. We've got ourselves our blank script, and just like everything else, it has exactly the same format as everything else. It's got the name of our class at the top. It inherits from auto behavior. We've got ourselves our start and our update functions. So I'll leave those for now. You don't have to leave these. If you have nothing to put in your start or your update, feel free just to simply delete them. You don't actually need them. Now, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to do this wrong on purpose right now. Let's go up here, and I'm going to add in here I want to add in a link to my text. I simply want to add in a reference to my text that I have on the screen right now, and I'm going to make it public, like I talked about before. If it's public, then we have the ability to see that within the inspector as far as Unity is concerned, and we can simply drag and drop the appropriate text in there. Now, I want to add a text, and I know it's called text, so I'm going to start typing here text. And oh no, there's an error. Why is there an error? There's text area, text, there's nothing here that's called text, which is very strange. Well, it's not actually very strange. The problem is, as I've indicated before in one of the other videos, we actually require access to that particular library, to the library that runs the UI. That has all the UI options within it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a brand new line up here. In line 4, I'm going to start by saying using, and it's going to allow me to say Unity, and as soon as I start adding, it's going to say, well, which Unity you want? And I believe it's under Unity Engine, so I'm going to go to Engine, double click, and I'm going to say dot, and as soon as I say dot, we can start typing UI. All right, and there is our UI. That's the one we're going to want to add. So I'm going to add UI, and I'm going to hit my semicolon. Now, as soon as I add that, as soon as I've added in this additional library, when I start typing text now, watch what happens. Text, and text is now available to me. So now I have the option to access any of my UI elements. So public text, and let's just call this I'll call it my start text. I don't care what we call it. My start text. And all I'm going to do inside of my start text is actually dynamically update that text. So currently our text says hello world, and I'm going to change it to, let's say, my start text dot, and I'm going to access the text available. So text is my text variable right there. Is going to be equal to, and I can set it equal to some string. And I'm going to say, instead of hello world, I'm going to say wake up Casanis. All right, because you ain't doing so good today. All right, so I'm going to set it equal to that particular string. That's the entirety of my script that I was going to sneak off and write separately. No reason, right? Anyway, guys, so that's the entirety of my script. I'm going to file save this right now. So we've got it. File save, beep. And I'm going to then minimize this and head back into Unity. So here we are right now. We've got ourselves our canvas. We've got ourselves our script associated with it. And right now, our public variable is blank. Watch what happens if I hit play right now. Let's go into our console. just so you guys can see this. And let's clear all of my warnings. If I hit play right now and I haven't actually updated that particular thing, it's going to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know where to set this stuff to. So if you've got yourself a public variable that's available within the inspector and you haven't initialized it in any way, so you haven't initialized it in code and you haven't initialized it right here by putting something in this location, then you're going to end up with this error every single time. Okay, so you have to make sure that this happens to everybody. Just make sure that you've got all of your public variables set. Now, I'm basically wanting to set my text example. Let's scrub that down there. I can see hello world right now. When I hit play, it now says wake up Kasanis. All right. And that's it. That's how easy it is to be able to access the variables that are included inside of all of your UI elements, right? There's a whole bunch that are available. If you want to set something in particular, just start typing it. Hit that dot and it's going to give you a list of everything that's available to you. Okay, so check that out, test that out, and see what exactly is available to you. Okay, so I think that's all I really want to talk about today. I think we're getting pretty long here. I didn't want to cover a whole lot. We covered the canvas, we covered the image, and we covered text. And the next episode on UI, we're going to cover the remainder of our options, so we can see a lot of different things, and we're going to see exactly how we can communicate with the through the UI system. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know down below with a thumbs up. And if you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. Give me that thumbs down. Just let me know what I can do to make sure I improve. All right, guys. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.